how do you deal with those customers that are like super pissy and like don't like their food and giving you a hard time?
I learned long ago that somebody that complains is an opportunity to turn them into your best customer. Because if you handle their problem moderately well or very well, they will never forget you. And they will always come back.
So today I'm here with Mike Tax, a restaurant owner, and his restaurant is Tax French Restaurant in Los Angeles, California. And today, Mike, we're going to be doing a couple of things. First of all, talking about what it is to be a restaurant owner. Second of all, the path that you took to get to where you are. And third and finally, some advice for young prospective restaurant owners. So let's get right into it. First of all, can you tell me about your job?
My job as a restaurant owner. Currently, it involves less work than it did initially. To get into the restaurant business is a time-consumptive, actually dedicated endeavor that you really have to allocate part of your life to. There isn't a shortcut to it. Mm-hmm. It involves a lot of passion, a lot of love for the discipline, and a lot of dedication to be able to work long hours. And a lot of hours that people don't normally want to work. Because you have to think about when you like to go to a restaurant is the times that most people aren't working, but restaurant operators are working. So yeah, we don't work Monday during the day typically, but everybody else is. But come Saturday night, when most people aren't working, or Sunday night, guess who's working? Restaurant people.
For sure.
So that's something that you really have to create an understanding that you're going to work hours when nobody else wants to work. So that's probably the one unique angle that really has to be understood about running a restaurant. Not to mention that it's a very labor-intensive business. There's people prepping every day during the day. And then you're getting ready for the nighttime business. You're fixing things from whatever happened over the weekend or the day before, and doing your accounting and standard business practices. And then you open your doors, either sometimes at lunch, but for sure for dinner. And you're going to be working till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, sometimes longer.
And as a restaurant owner, what are your actual responsibilities?
Make sure the customer's happy. You want return customers. Mm-hmm. Customer's king. They're almost always right. And I say almost always because of of course you have unreasonable situations that you just can't fix, but you try to do your best. But satisfaction is key. And over-delivering is beyond satisfaction. You have to deliver more than you promise.
So I shouldn't say day, but what is a typical night like as a restaurant owner?
Oh, coming to work, make sure that people show up and start off. You're doing accounting to start with. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're closing the books from the previous day because you might have closed up and it depends on the restaurant, of course. If you have a bar in the restaurant, you have to close the books from the night before because you certainly weren't going to do that at 12 or 1 or 2 or 3 a.m. So you close the books from the day before, balance it, get ready, and now your kitchen staff is already coming to work and prepping for that coming day. So you've got two things going on at once. You're doing book work on one end, baking possibly, and you're getting ready for this coming day. So that's the beginning of your day. Then once you're ready, you open the doors. Now you're serving customers. You're greeting customers. You're planning how many, the staff that you need for that week based on reservations. And it changes. It's fluid. It changes on a daily basis. It's not an easy business. And then furthermore, you're putting up the plates that you're going to serve today, that special board. So now you've done your prep. Now your servers start walking in and you go, okay, here's the specials for the day. Here's how you're going to describe these specials.
Yeah.
Here's your station. This is where you're going to work. Or maybe it's the same station that you always get, but this is your station. Then you open the doors so the people come in. You seat the people. You make sure they're satisfied. You over-deliver. You try to make sure they're super happy because you want return business. And I'll tell you a little secret about return business. How do you increase your business 50%? Get somebody that comes in twice a month to come in 3 times a month.
Exactly.
You've just increased gross by 50%.
So it sounds like this business is all about the customers. That's safe to say.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
What is your favorite thing about being a restaurant owner?
Satisfaction. People's satisfaction.
What inspired you to pursue a career as a restaurant owner? Like, did you always know you wanted to be a restaurant owner?
Absolutely not. No. There was restaurant business in my family. We had a legendary facility in downtown LA, not the one that I operated. And it was started in 1927. So it was in my family. And so, of course, being a young man, I went to college. I studied geology. I didn't want to be a restaurateur. I put myself through college, working a little bit of restaurants, some restaurant jobs, bartending, and a little bit of serving at places outside of the family and within the family. And my favorite jobs actually were I worked on commercial and sport fishing boats, where I learned a lot about fish, and which is kind of handy for restaurants, not knowing that I was going to end up in the restaurant business. So I studied geology. I had my career path. I love the outdoors. I love going someplace new all the time. I wanted to be a geologist. You know, I finished college and I was looking for the job, looking at the job market. And at that point in time, the price of oil had dipped down to $17 a barrel. Now, being a petroleum geologist type guy, I'm like, well, here's what I'm faced with. Either I get a job in Saudi Arabia or Venezuela, or I'm not going to get a job worth a hill of beans because there's no domestic production. We're buying everything from other countries, kind of a little bit like what's happening now, but the price of oil is high. So I was faced with, I really don't want to do that now. So I fell back on an old pursuit. I worked on a fishing boat for a while, and I said, this is really hard work, and the career path isn't great. Some guys do very well with it. Some guys don't do very well at all. But I had an angle. I had the restaurant angle. So I went into the restaurant, and I started from the ground up. I'm proud to say that I've done virtually everything in a restaurant, every job. What sets me apart from my previous generation of owners, the type of owner, is that previous ones normally came in as management level or worked as a waiter and then came in as a manager and then ran a restaurant. I tried to do every job there. And I felt that if I was going to go into that level, the management level, the next step, I should learn every job.
That makes sense.
And it was rewarding. And I knew how to entrust people that I worked with. Like if I wanted to decide what kind of dish soap we would buy for the restaurant. I didn't make that decision. I made that decision with my dishwasher, probably one of the lowest paid people in the restaurant. Because you know who washed dishes every day? Not me, the dishwasher. He knows the product that works is best suited for that machine better than I did.
I wanted to ask you, how did you know it was the right thing to switch from the sport fishing industry to go into like the restaurant industry? And also, when did you know?
That's a really good question. I was kind of dabbling a little bit in both. I realized that sport fishing was a really tough avenue and commercial fishing equally tough. Really good short term is really great money. It was good money for a very young man. I always had a pocket full of cash. But I knew as a career-based, having other experiences, mainly geology and the restaurant, I had a few avenues to pick from. And I just picked the restaurant business because satisfying in a business environment aspect, not anything more than that. And that's where the chips fell.
What skills and qualities would you say are essential for success in your field?
Willing to work long hours. Tolerance of the public is a big one. That's huge. If you're not a people person, it's not the business for you. If you're not willing to work long hours, probably find a different job. Those are the two main qualities. Because as I mentioned, the thing that made me most happy about what I was doing in the restaurant was satisfaction and exceeding expectations to take that to another level, becoming good at that. And without some passion and without willing to work long hours, because you got to learn the job, you got to know every facet of it. You have to be pretty much hands-on. As time goes on, you can find people to do that job for you. As I mentioned, like the good dishwasher, they can pick the dish up. You start building a crew, but when you start, you don't know who's best suited for each job and the stars that you have. Well, once you get the stars, then everything gets a lot easier.
What would you say the biggest challenge of being a restaurant owner is?
Funding. It requires a fair amount of capitalization. The equipment's expensive. And the other challenge is coming up with a good idea. And finally, the very most important, location.
So I know you talked about funding as a challenge. So I'm sure that there have been moments where you have faced funding challenges. So can you talk to me about a specific incident where you faced a funding challenge and how you overcame it?
That's a really, really good question. In 2008, there was a little bit of a pretty good .com.
Oh yeah.
The .com shakeup and
tons of
kind of a recession.
Yeah, tons of movies on it.
Yeah, it was tough. That was a tough time, and I almost lost the things that I had built up. Fortunately, I didn't have too much debt. There's a couple paths to take when you're running a restaurant. You have one successful good unit. Okay, you either multiply that into multiple units, or you buy the prop. You start living slimmer than you need to. In other words, with a smaller budget than you need yourself personally, reinvest into the restaurant, and hopefully start buying some parcels. Buy pieces of land around the restaurant or a parking lot or something nearby to where now you're not paying rent or lease, you own the property. And that's the route I took, because I felt that the restaurant that we served country French food, fairly labor intensive, and hands-on approach to it. A lot of slow cooking, a lot of love in the cuisine. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel at that point in time when I was doing it, it was a recipe that could be turned into multiple units. So I had a crossroads to bear there. And it's like, okay, do I go and try another restaurant? Because like back then, the big thing was like, do a Mexican restaurant. Low cost ingredients. Everybody likes it. Easier to make money. Mm-hmm. Easier to duplicate.
French restaurant, not so much.
Exactly. It's harder to do. Find out. White tablecloth French restaurant is hard to do. And it's hard to make multiple units in that. So my path was to buy the properties it sat on. And those turned out to be very lucrative in the end run, but in the short term, very taxing. And I mentioned 2008 and other times when it was really came close to like not making it.
What did buying those properties do for you?
Gave me security and now a landing pad that I had in my life that I never expected that I would have. I was on a fabled street, Sunset Boulevard in LA. It's a world famous street. And was able to sell the property that I currently have sold the property that the restaurant sits on. I keep a lease. I lease it back from them, but I did very well and I diversified into multifamily and multifamily buildings and I'm a landlord.
That's cool. So what changes in the industries have occurred over the years?
Costs and legislations. Restaurant wholesale food costs has increased over 100%. In other words, double.
Wow.
And some of the culprits you would never expect. Produce, always thought of as a very inexpensive item, has more than doubled in price. To buy a bag of lettuce or a bag of potatoes or whatever has really gone through the roof. Beef, not quite as much. Fish went astronomical.
Wow.
So I'm probably, I know it's well over 100%. I haven't done the calcs lately, but I'm going to say it's probably 120% what it was 10 years ago. And labor costs similarly, because I'm in LA, and I mentioned legislative. You know, we have a minimum wage now in the city of LA. It's over $17 an hour for everybody.
Yeah.
And there's no tip.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. And these same people 10 years ago cost me $8 an hour. So that's more than double. And that was even less than 10 years ago.
Wow.
And it stayed about there for a while.
What would you say the best path for someone who's interested in becoming a restaurant owner is to take?
There's a couple of great paths. One is, are you primarily interested as a chef owner, as a guy that's going to be the chef and then own the business as well? For those guys, I highly suggest, because being a chef means you have to go learn how to be a chef, not only just work in a restaurant. I think the best training available to everybody is in Europe. France, Italy, Spain, maybe even Germany, and even now the UK to some degree, thanks to some luminaries, some famous stars like Gordon Ramsay. But the bar has come up. And in Europe, I feel the bar is the highest. It's the most consistent across the board. You can go into almost any restaurant in Lyon, France, or Milan, Italy, and the food's pretty darn good, no matter where you go. Or so, as a young woman or man, go and work in those restaurants. Go take a trip for a year and go work in those restaurants and see what that's like. Like I've seen graduates from the Culinary Institute, and I've interviewed them, you know, and I said, well, they want to come in and work as a line cook or a sous chef. There's a table of vegetables. There's some carrots and some cucumbers and maybe some meats or whatever. Make a dish, and I watch their knife speed. And that's the first thing I watch for is knife speed. If they don't have knife speed, you got to get some knife speed, man. And you don't get that at the culinary, you know, at a school. You get that by prepping a lot of vegetables or prepping a lot of things at a restaurant. Really, really important. So that's one path, the chef path. And to become a chef that's credentialed, you could go back to America, but you should have worked in Europe for some point in time, or some really, really high-level restaurant. There are some in the United States as well. You'll find more opportunities to do that in Europe than you will here. Secondly, the other path is to work the business path. And there are a number of good schools. I think of like Cornell, got a great restaurant program. Learn everything there is to know about business accounting. You know, they have majors now in restaurant management.
What would like a major in restaurants entail? Do you know?
It would entail, for sure, some levels of accounting, business classes tailored more to restaurants. Beyond that, you know, your standard course curriculum. Mm-hmm. But I know those restaurant management classes are pretty challenging, and there's not just one. There's a series. That's great for the corporate angle. Are we looking at doing corporate restaurants, or are we looking at doing independents? Independence is a tough go right now. Really tough.
Imagine, yeah.
Really tough. And it's predominantly now staffed by or operated by chef owners.
So it definitely probably will vary based on the type of restaurant, the location of your restaurant. But do you know what the average yearly earning potential of a restaurant owner is?
It's so variable. It can be, what do you classify as a restaurant? Are you talking about a cafe, a small cafe, and maybe these guys make about $100K. And then if you really hit an idea and you have a hot idea, good staff, super busy urban environment or busy suburban environment, can't be rural because you just don't get the clientele base. Yeah. You're not going to get the people that are willing to spend that kind of money, but you can make upwards of several $100,000 a year. So I know, and the corporate jobs can be very, very lucrative. The under level corporate jobs.
We talked about a little bit earlier, like your sport fishing path and you working in all the jobs in the restaurants, but I want to back you up all the way to high school and even before high school. Can you talk about the road that you took to get to where you are today?
Oh my God. Okay. Back in the day, I skipped a couple of grades. Back then, they really didn't have, and I'm dating myself now, you can just look at me and tell hello. But they didn't have like AP classes. They didn't have honors classes. And the way they dealt with kids that were a little bit smart, and I'm not saying that I still am smart today, but back when I was your age, I was considered pretty smart. And so how they dealt with it was to skip you. So I graduated. I was a senior at 15 and graduated at 16. And I barely got my driver's license before my graduation.
That's crazy.
It was kind of crazy. So I went immediately to college and felt that I just wasn't fitting in. I didn't feel good. I went to Leo the Marymount, and I took a break for a year, and I went and worked sport fishing. I went and worked on a sport fishing boat. And then I came back, and I ended my college career at Cal State Long Beach, which I liked very much. I liked the town of Long Beach. It was great. But by then I had found myself. So there was a maturity-based angle that I had to figure out for myself, because I was basically always a small kid in high school. I was smaller than most. Probably smallest of my class, or one of, and youngest. I remember one other guy that was my age in my class, because it wasn't uncommon to skip again. And finally, when I caught up and everything, leaving out in college, then I had a more clear path.
For sure. And finally, I want to ask you, what advice might you have for young adults who want to be restaurant owners?
I would say, go work in one first. Make sure that you've worked in one. That's really critical. Are you going to enjoy that fast pace? Are you going to enjoy that? Well, I have to remember that table 8 needs a fork, and table 16, it's their birthday, and then at table 12, they don't like their salad. And meanwhile, table 11 needs to be picked up in the kitchen. So you got to be able to juggle a lot of things. And that I'm talking like I'm a server right now, but that also applies to management. The manager's got to know what's going on the floor to be a really good manager. There's managers that stand behind a desk and just set out a schedule and do some purchasing, but they don't know what the hell's going on the floor. You really need to know what's going on the floor. And if you like that fast pace and you're willing to work long hours, and you love food and beverage, then that's something that may be great for you.
I'm just curious, how do you deal with those customers that are like super pissy and like don't like their food and giving you a hard time?
As a little side note on that, I learned long ago that somebody that complains is an opportunity to turn them into your best customer. Because if you handle their problem and you handle it moderately well or very well, they will never forget you. And they will always come back.
That's awesome.
So that's what you have to go in the mindset when you're dealing with. And you try to like everybody, and you're not going to like everybody sometimes. There's going to be situations like, oh, man, not that lady again. And I've had those customers, and I've turned them into some of my best customers. But I know I know them now. I know how to handle them. And put on the smile. Put on the charm, put on the smile, and do your best. And you can only do what you can do. I remember a table that they were coming from out of town. And I overheard them talking. And they said, you know, I came to LA and I never got a burrito. And this is a town where it's known for pretty good Mexican food, and I think they were from Minnesota or something like that. We had a very good Mexican restaurant next door. And I told one of my guys, I says, I'll be back in a minute. I went next door, and I knew they had good carne asada burritos. And I got him a carne asada burrito, wrapped it up to go, and I gave it to him, and I said, take this with you. And I didn't charge him for it. And I said, but I overheard them. So I over-delivered. And I got them something that they didn't get on their whole trip to LA. And now that they got. And I'm going to guarantee you they probably told that story to 20 people. So every time you do something good and exceed expectations, that's got some track to it. That's got some track life. Consequently, on the flip side of that coin, you do something not well, and that might even have more legs than than doing something good. That's just human nature.
That's such an awesome story. Well, Mike, I want to thank you so much for coming out and supporting our mission. And I really hope that young adults all across the nation listen to your story and hear your advice, because I think anyone who wants to be a restaurant owner would really benefit from listening to our conversation, listening to what you have to say. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the opportunity.